Do trans athletes have an unfair advantage?
I'm just some girl from Victoria, BC.
McKinnon takes it into world champion.
Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
Two transgender teenagers dominated the girls' track and field championships earlier this month.
Heard the words of Alana McLaughlin and how the HRT, the hormone replacement therapy, took away many of the strengths that made her a man and may limit her ability in strength and endurance, but we have to see it firsthand.
Laurel Hubbard is set to become the first transgender athlete to compete at the Olympics.
A 17-year-old transgender boy in Texas has won the state's girls wrestling championship.
And should they be allowed to compete in women's sports?
No, it's true. It's true.
Honestly,
It's a completely different sport. The men are a lot faster, and they serve harder, they hit harder. It's just a different game.
I know the very nature of this topic is controversial, and this may come across to some people as quote-unquote transphobic, but I want to say that it is clear to me that gender dysphoria is a real medical condition, and people who experience gender dysphoria should be treated with tolerance and compassion and not have to face discrimination and violence because of who they are. However, we're talking about competition and fairness in sport, so naturally the question that comes to mind is, do trans athletes have an unfair advantage, and should they be allowed to compete against women? That is the question this video is going to answer. For those of you who don't quite understand the concept of transgender, we're talking about biological males transitioning into females through the use of hormone blockers and surgery and competing against biological women. Sex segregation is how competitive sport has recognized the performance advantages elite male athletes have over elite female athletes. In 1998, Serena and Venus Williams claimed they could beat any man outside the top 200 in a singles match. One man accepted the challenge, world ranked number 203 Carson Brash, and according to journalists, Brash's training regimen centered around beer and cigarettes. Despite all that, Carson still came out victorious over both sisters. When Brash was interviewed after the match, he told the reporter he had finished a round of golf and 2 beers earlier that day, and it didn't matter if the sisters played someone outside the top 300 or above, they didn't stand a chance. Now, that observation and statement may come across as sexist. However, data proves that high school boys athletes can outperform female Olympic athletes. And yes, that wasn't a mistake. I said high school boys athletes. 10.49 is the women's world record for the fastest time in the 100 meters, and 4 individual male high schoolers between the ages of 15 and 18 have already beaten that record. Now, if the idea to separate men from women in sports made sense 50 years ago when former US President Richard Nixon passed Title IX, how did we get to the point where elite male athletes are now allowed to identify as women and compete against elite female athletes, and how is this supposed to be progress for women globally? Well, we have to jump in our time machine and go back to 1976 when Renee Richards, the first ever documented trans athlete, made headlines during the 1976 US Open when she was exposed for being a biological male competing in a women's tournament. When the news broke out, 25 of the 32 female competitors dropped out. When the WTA requested Richards to take a test which would indicate if she had XX or XY chromosomes, she refused and therefore was banned from competing in the US Open.
You being a doctor yourself, if you haven't already had a chromosome test as a result of your recent experience, you might suppose that your chromosomes would turn out to have the pattern of a man's, might they not?
They might. And I think the probabilities are that they would show the male XY pattern. But I don't think that it is a fair test for sex regardless of what the chromosome pattern might show.
A year after the incident, she filed a lawsuit claiming that her civil rights were violated and that the policy was unfair. As a result, the New York Supreme Court ruled in her favor and also ruled Richards legally female, which would spark a movement that would ultimately change the rules if trans women can compete against biological women. So, what qualifies to be a woman?
Well, it's that million-dollar question again, isn't it? The treacherous puzzler that's frazzling even the world's biggest brains. What is a woman?
How would you guys define a woman?
What is a woman?
What is a woman?
Oh, now again, that's a whole other thing.
I think being a woman is a state of mind and like an identity. There's so many different things people can identify as, like they, thems, or non-binary. Like, it all depends on the person, how you feel.
All day. I don't know
What the heck is going on?
But let me know your opinion down in the comment section what you think a woman is. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, a woman is defined as an adult human female. Science says women are born with XX chromosomes and are capable of pregnancy and giving birth. However, in the US and Canada, trans women are legally and socially considered women.
They should respect an athlete's legally recognized sex or gender.
Which explains why there is so much controversy when a trans athlete is banned from competing. Sports requirements try the best they can to make it fair for everyone when a trans athlete competes. For example, some high schools in the US only allow athletes to compete against the sex they were assigned at birth, which seems reasonable, right? Well, what happens when a 17-year-old girl that's using testosterone to become a boy is only allowed to compete against girls? Well, she goes undefeated 52-0 and wins back-to-back state titles.
A 17-year-old transgender boy in Texas has won the state's girls wrestling championship.
Now, most of us will agree when an athlete is using exogenous testosterone to increase their natural test levels above the average range for their sex is considered performance-enhancing drug use. It shouldn't even be a question, which is why sports organizations have created specific requirements in order for trans athletes to compete. For example, the Olympics and NCAA say that trans female athletes must go through 1 year of testosterone suppression. In theory, this seems more practical than the birth certificate requirement because, of course, men produce more testosterone than women, therefore it makes sense to reduce the trans athlete's test levels to a woman's to keep things fair. Or does it? Well, I'm going to raise another hypothetical scenario. What happens when a full-fledged, biological male competing as an elite D1 swimmer, ranked 65th in the men's category, goes on hormone suppression for 1 year, and then is allowed to compete against female swimmers?
The three-time Ivy League champion Leah Thomas was the top qualifier in the prelims. She swam 4:33.82. Rowdy, in that race, Leah Thomas, the only swimmer to stay under 28 seconds on every lap. This is a much different story than what it looked like in the prelims. Emma Wyant, the Olympic silver medalist, stroke for stroke with Leah Thomas. Thomas starts to inch it out a bit.
They're trying to stay with her, and she's moved up against that lane line, which is giving Wyant a little bit of an edge as far as catching a little draft, but it looks like Thomas is going to win.
Leah Thomas in the prelims, a little bit faster every single lap. Here at the end of this race, Thomas starting to pull away. At the bell, it's Leah Thomas moving away from Emma Wyant. Brooke 40 into third. Thomas wins the NCAA championship.
The problem with the 1 year hormone suppression rule is, as powerful as hormone replacement therapy is, it cannot completely erase the development the body experienced during puberty. Or in Laurel Hubbard's case, it doesn't erase the 31 years of manhood she experienced prior to becoming a woman. The inclusion of trans athletes come at a hefty price that women must pay for. It comes at the cost of scholarships, prize money, sponsorships, recognition, and even safety.
The first race that I competed against a transgender athlete was during my freshman year. And once the gun went off, the two transgender athletes took off flying and left all of us girls in the dust. Throughout all 4 years of high school, I was forced to compete against biological males. I only competed against them in the sprinting events, but I raced against these athletes over a dozen times throughout the years, and every single time I lost.
Did they inch you out of medals that you would have won otherwise, or trophies you would have won?
They beat me out by 20 meters out of medals, and qualifying spots, I missed out on qualifying for New England's. I had to go in the long jump and the 4x200 meter relay, so I was forced on the sidelines in my own event, and if they were not there, I would have been able to qualify. So I missed out on so much throughout my high school career.
Did they win all the events or almost all the events?
Between the two of them, they won every single event they competed in.
How does that feel?
It is so frustrating and heartbreaking because we elite female athletes train so hard to shave just fractions of a second off of our time. And going into races knowing that we will never be able to win.
Feels like all that work gone to waste?
It does. After so many losses, it just gets to the point of, why am I even doing this? Why am I keep training so hard and sacrificing so much just to place third and beyond?
But before you start typing away in the comment section blaming trans athletes for everything, honestly, it's not their fault. The people that should be held accountable are the sports organizations that are allowing this to happen. I hate to say this, but trans athletes are only following the rules. So right now, there is estimated to be 1.6 million people over the age of 13 that identify as transgender. Inevitably, that number will increase in the upcoming years as long as mainstream media continues to push trans ideology to the younger generation. But that's another topic for a different video. So what are sports organizations going to do? Well, this year, FINA, the International Swimming Federation, has declared that only trans women who began transitioning before the age of 12 can compete in high-level international competitions. Now, whether or not you think transitioning a child before the age of 12 is okay is up for debate and a completely separate topic. International Rugby has taken a step further, banning all transgender women from international matches because it's unsafe, and World Athletics, which oversees track and field and other events, has hinted they may do the same thing in the future. In a poll conducted by Gallup, it revealed that 62% of Americans are actually against trans athletes competing against their opposite biological sex. From my research and reading the comment section of every available source I could find on this topic, I will say that the majority of people in general do not support trans women competing against women, and the two types of people who actually support the inclusion of trans athletes are 1, the trans athletes themselves, or 2, people who've never played sports. Go figure. But does that mean trans athletes should never be allowed to compete? Obviously not. There are a number of sports that aren't sex segregated, like motorbike racing or darts. However, in sports where it's meant to be sex segregated, organizations could create an open category similar to bodybuilding where hormones, body parts, etc. doesn't matter and it's fair play for everyone. Now, if you're still wondering what my stance is in the whole debacle, I kind of gave it away, but I'll say it anyways. Trans athletes have an unfair advantage and should only be allowed to compete against the sex they were assigned at birth and follow the same drug testing protocols as their competition. There should be no exception, and sports organizations should make open categories for their sports so that trans athletes can feel included. But let me know what you guys think. Comment down below. Do you think trans athletes have an unfair advantage? Should there be an open category, or should they be allowed to compete with whoever they want? If you found this video informative, please leave this video a like, and as always, I'll talk to you in the next one.